September 14, 1944. 2:47 p.m. Camp Concordia, Kansas. Obergefreiter Klaus Zimmermann stood frozen in the doorway of the Safeway grocery store on Main Street, his legs refusing to move forward. Behind him, 3 other German prisoners shuffled nervously, their guard, a 19-year-old farm boy from Nebraska named Eddie Morrison, watching them with casual disinterest. Klaus's hands trembled, not from fear, from something he couldn't name yet. The store stretched before him like a hallucination, shelves stacked 8 feet high, pyramids of canned goods, fresh meat behind glass counters, bread, real bread, dozens of loaves. His vision blurred. Before we continue with Klaus's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now, back to Concordia, Kansas, where Klaus Zimmermann was about to have every certainty he'd ever held shattered by a grocery store. Klaus Zimmermann was born in 1921 in Gelsenkirchen, a coal mining town in the Ruhr Valley. His father worked underground for 32 years before black lung took him in 1938. Klaus was 17, the eldest of 4 children. His mother took in laundry. They ate potato soup 4 nights a week. Meat was a Sunday luxury, when they could afford it. When the Wehrmacht came recruiting in 1939, Klaus saw it as salvation. 3 meals a day, a uniform, purpose. He believed what they told him, that Germany was starving because of the Versailles Treaty, because of enemies surrounding them, because they'd been cheated and humiliated. The propaganda made sense to a hungry teenager from a dying town. He shipped out with the 352nd Infantry Division in 1940. France fell in 6 weeks. Klaus fired his rifle twice, never saw who he was shooting at. They marched through French villages, and he remembers being shocked by the food. The French had food, real food, but his officers explained it away. The French were hoarding what rightfully belonged to Germany. By 1943, Klaus was in Normandy, manning a machine gun nest on Omaha Beach. He was 23 years old, weighed 147 pounds, and hadn't had a decent meal in 8 months. Rations had been cut 3 times. The bread was mixed with sawdust. Coffee was made from acorns. When the letter came that his youngest sister Anna had died during an air raid in Gelsenkirchen, he couldn't cry. He was too hungry to feel anything. June 6, 1944, 6:32 a.m. The horizon turned black with ships. Horizon. Klaus fired into the smoke and noise for 4 hours straight, until the barrel of his MG-42 turned white-hot. Then American artillery bracketed his position. The concussion threw him 30 feet. When he woke up, his ears were bleeding and 3 GIs were pointing rifles at his face. They gave him a chocolate bar. He vomited it up 10 minutes later. His stomach couldn't handle real food anymore. The journey from Normandy to Kansas took 7 weeks. Klaus crossed the Atlantic in the hold of a Liberty ship with 600 other prisoners. They were fed twice a day, white bread, canned beef, oranges, coffee with real sugar. Oranges. Klaus hadn't seen an orange since before the war. The first one he ate, he chewed the peel too, not knowing you were supposed to remove it. The American guards laughed, but not cruelly. One of them, a corporal from Ohio named Frank Mueller, German ancestry, spoke some German, explained that America had so much food they fed oranges to prisoners. Klaus didn't believe him. It had to be propaganda, some trick. They were being fattened up for something. Camp Concordia sat on flat Kansas prairie, surrounded by wheat fields that stretched to the horizon. The camp held 4 German prisoners. Klaus arrived on August 12, 1944. The barracks were clean, the beds had real mattresses, the toilets flushed. 3 meals a day, every day, portions so large that prisoners couldn't finish them. Within 2 weeks, Klaus had gained 11 pounds. His dysentery cleared up. The sores on his legs healed. Other prisoners whispered in the barracks at night. This couldn't be real. This was too much. The guards must be special. The camp must be special, designed to make them think America was winning. The real America must be starving, just like Germany. Klaus met Ernst Hoffmann in the mess hall on his third day. Ernst was from Stuttgart, captured in Africa in 1943. He'd been in American camps for 18 months. Ernst had gained 40 pounds. He looked healthy, pink skin, clear eyes. When Klaus asked him about the food, Ernst laughed bitterly. "It never stops," Ernst said. "Every day, 3 times. More food than you can eat. I thought I was being tricked too. I thought it for 4 months. Then I realized this is just how they eat. This is normal for them." Klaus didn't believe him. The camp operated under the Geneva Convention. Prisoners were paid 80 cents a day in scrip for labor details. The work was voluntary, farming mostly, helping local farmers whose sons were overseas. Klaus volunteered immediately. Not for the money, because sitting in the camp, eating 3 meals a day while doing nothing was making him insane. He needed to understand, he needed to see. He was assigned to a work crew that went into Concordia 3 times a week, helping unload supplies at the train depot. That's where he met Eddie Morrison, the 19-year-old guard from Nebraska. Eddie was skinny, barely 140 pounds, looked like he might blow away in a Kansas wind. But Eddie had grown up on a farm. Eddie had never gone hungry a single day in his life. Eddie couldn't comprehend what that meant. "You guys really had it tough over there, huh?" Eddie said one day, offering Klaus a cigarette. Klaus took it. American cigarettes, not the sawdust-filled Wehrmacht rations. Real tobacco. He smoked it slowly. "How much did your family make?" Klaus asked. "Before the war, your father. How much money?" Eddie shrugged. "I don't know. We were farmers. Didn't have much cash, but we had food. Garden, chickens, couple of pigs, we got by." "But the Depression," Klaus pressed. "You went hungry then?" Eddie looked confused. "Yeah, the Depression was tough. We had to cut back. Only had meat 5 times a week instead of 7. Sold eggs to buy gasoline. It was rough." 5 times a week. Klaus stared at him. Eddie didn't understand what he'd just said. To Eddie, eating meat 5 times a week during the worst economic collapse in American history was cutting back. Klaus's family had eaten meat once a week during good times. The numbers didn't make sense. Klaus had been told his whole life that America was collapsing, that capitalism had failed, that American workers were starving in breadlines. But Eddie Morrison, a poor farm boy from Nebraska, had eaten better during the Depression than Klaus had eaten during Germany's prosperity under Hitler. September 14th, 1944. The work detail was different that day. Instead of the depot, they were going to help the local grocery store move inventory. The owner, Mr. Henderson, was 67 years old. His 2 sons were in the Pacific. He needed help moving canned goods from the storeroom to the shelves. Eddie Morrison loaded 6 prisoners into the back of a truck, Klaus, Ernst, and 4 others. The drive into town took 12 minutes. Klaus watched Kansas scroll past. Farms, silos. Every farm had a car. Some had 2. Tractors in the fields. Children playing in yards, all of them healthy, none of them skeletal. The truck stopped in front of Safeway. Eddie jumped out, opened the back. "All right, boys, let's go. Just moving boxes, nothing complicated." Klaus stepped down from the truck. Main Street, Concordia, Kansas. A hardware store, a diner, a bank, everything clean, everything painted. No bomb damage, no rubble. It looked like a postcard. It looked like propaganda. Then Eddie opened the door to the grocery store. The smell hit Klaus first. Bread, fresh bread. The yeasty, warm smell of it. His legs locked. He couldn't move. Eddie looked back. "Come on, Klaus. It's just a store." Klaus forced himself forward. 1 step, 2 through the doorway. The store was 3 200 square feet, 47 aisles. Klaus would later learn these numbers because he asked Mr. Henderson, needing to quantify what he was seeing, needing to make it real through mathematics. The produce section was to his left. Apples, oranges, bananas, lettuce, tomatoes, potatoes in huge bins, onions, carrots, all fresh, mountains of it. No ration cards, no lines, just sitting there. The canned goods aisle stretched 40 feet. Tomatoes, beans, peaches, pears, soup, tuna, Spam. Corned beef, stacked floor to ceiling, hundreds of cans, thousands. Klaus tried to count them and couldn't. The meat counter, fresh beef, pork chops, chicken, sausages, bacon. Behind glass, kept cold, but so much of it. A sign read, "Beef roast, 43 cents Dutch LB." 43 cents. Klaus earned 80 cents a day. With 1 day's labor, he could buy nearly 2 pounds of beef. In Germany, before the war, his father's entire weekly salary might buy 1 pound of beef if they could find it. Ernst was beside him, breathing hard. "I told you," Ernst whispered. "I told you it was like this." Klaus walked down the bread aisle. White bread, whole wheat bread, rye bread, rolls, buns, loaves wrapped in wax paper. The price tag on white bread read 10 cents. 10 cents for a loaf of real bread. Klaus's throat closed. He couldn't breathe. Behind him, another prisoner, a corporal named Wilhelm Becker from Munich, made a sound. Klaus turned. Wilhelm was crying, not sobbing, just tears running down his face, silent, staring at shelves of canned vegetables. "It's a trick," Wilhelm said. "It has to be. They set this up. For us. To break us." Eddie Morrison was watching them with concern. "Are you guys okay? You want some water or something?" Mr. Henderson emerged from the back room. He was a small man, bald, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked at the prisoners, saw their faces, and understood immediately. He'd seen it before. This wasn't his first work crew of German POWs. "Eddie," Mr. Henderson said quietly, "why don't you take them to the back room? Let them sit down for a minute." "They're fine, Mr. Henderson. They're just—" "Eddie, take them to the back." The back room was cooler. Cases of canned goods stacked on pallets. A table with a coffee pot. Mr. Henderson poured 6 cups of coffee without asking, added sugar and cream from a pitcher. Real cream. He set the cups in front of the prisoners. "Drink," he said. "Then we'll talk." Klaus picked up the cup. His hands were shaking. He drank. The coffee was hot, sweet, rich. Everything coffee should be. Everything coffee had stopped being in Germany by 1941. Mr. Henderson pulled up a stool. He looked at Klaus, then at Wilhelm, then at the others. "You boys thought we were starving, didn't you?" Silence. "You thought this was propaganda. Special food just for prisoners. Just for this camp." Ernst spoke, his voice hoarse. "Isn't it?" Mr. Henderson shook his head. "Son, this is a regular store, small town store. Concordia has 5 errand people. We got 11 stores like this one. This ain't special. This is normal. This is just Tuesday." "That's impossible," Wilhelm said. "No country has this much food. Not during a war. We're being lied to." "Mr. Henderson stood up, walked to a filing cabinet, pulled out a ledger. He opened it on the table. "Here's my inventory from last week. Here's what I sold. Here's what I ordered. You can read English?" Klaus could read some. He looked at the numbers. 340 loaves of bread sold, 180 pounds of beef, 89 pounds of coffee, 450 cans of various vegetables, in 1 week, in 1 store, in a town of 5. There's all 0 people. "We got rationing," Mr. Henderson continued. "Sugar's rationed, coffee's rationed, meat's rationed. But rationed don't mean none. Rationed means you get less than you want. My family still eats meat 6 days a week. We just can't eat steak every night. 6 days a week, during a war with rationing." Klaus felt something break inside him. "My son Jerry's in the Pacific," Mr. Henderson said. "He's 24. My boy Tommy's with Patton somewhere in France. They're both healthy. They were healthy when they left. Every boy from this town who went to war was healthy. You know why? Because they grew up eating. Really eating. 3 meals a day, meat, vegetables, milk, their whole lives." He paused, looking at Klaus directly. "You boys didn't, did you? You went hungry. Maybe not starving, but hungry. Your whole lives. Wondering where the next meal was coming from, am I right?" Klaus couldn't speak. He nodded. "And they told you it was because of enemies," Mr. Henderson continued. "Because somebody was keeping food from you. Because you needed to fight to get your share. That's what they told you." Ernst's voice cracked. "Yes. But it wasn't true, was it? Because here you are, in my store in Kansas in the middle of a war, and there's more food here than you've ever seen in your life. And this ain't special, this is just, normal. Wilhelm put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. Klaus wanted to tell him to stop, to show some dignity, but he couldn't. Because he was crying too. They all were. They'd been lied to. About everything. The hunger wasn't because of Versailles. It wasn't because of enemies. It wasn't because Germany lacked resources. The hunger was because the men who ruled them had chosen guns over bread, tanks over butter, conquest over feeding their own people. America was fighting a war on two fronts. America was feeding Britain, feeding Russia, feeding its own massive military. And American civilians were still eating meat 6 times a week, still buying fresh bread for 10 cents, still complaining about rationing like it was a hardship. The numbers told the story. In 1943, Germany had produced 27 million tons of grain. America had produced 189 million tons. Germany's entire economy was mobilized for war. Every factory, every worker, every resource bent toward the military. And they were still hungry. America's economy was producing warships, bombers, tanks, ammunition, enough to supply half the world, and American grocery stores still had 47 aisles of food that nobody needed ration cards to buy. Klaus learned later that American agricultural production had actually increased during the war. Increased. While German civilians were eating bread mixed with sawdust and chestnuts, while Klaus's sister Anna had starved to death in Gelsenkirchen, America had so much food they were worried about surpluses driving prices down. The propaganda had told Klaus that Americans were weak, soft, couldn't endure hardship. But he understood now. Americans hadn't endured hardship, not because they were weak, because they didn't have to. Because their country was so rich, so productive, so abundant, that even during a war, even with rationing, they still lived better than Germans had lived during peacetime. You can't beat that. You can't defeat a country that's so rich, it feeds its prisoners better than you feed your own soldiers. The war was over. Klaus had known it intellectually when he surrendered on Omaha Beach, but he understood it emotionally in that grocery store in Kansas. Germany had lost before it began. Mr. Henderson gave them 15 minutes. Then he put them to work, moving cases of canned peaches from the storeroom to aisle 9. Klaus worked mechanically, his mind numb. Ernst worked beside him, not speaking. Wilhelm kept stopping, staring at the shelves, then forcing himself to continue. At 4:30 p.m., Mr. Henderson closed the store. He gave each prisoner an apple for the truck ride back. "You boys did good work. I'll request you again next week if you want to come back." Klaus bit into the apple. It was crisp, sweet, perfect. He'd eaten better in 3 months as a prisoner than he had in 6 years in the Wehrmacht. On the truck back to camp, nobody spoke. Eddie Morrison tried to make conversation, gave up, let them sit in silence. When they arrived at Camp Concordia, the guard at the gate checked them in. Dinner was at 5:30 p.m., pork chops, mashed potatoes, green beans, chocolate pudding for dessert. Klaus ate everything on his plate. Then he went to his bunk and lay down. Ernst sat on the bunk below. "We lost," Ernst said, "not because they were stronger soldiers. We lost because they had this, all of this, the food, the production, the wealth. You can't fight that. We were told," Klaus started. "We were told lies." Ernst's voice was flat. Everything was a lie. The hunger was a lie. The necessity was a lie. They starved us and told us it was temporary, that once we won there would be enough. But there was always enough. Just not for us, for the tanks, for the guns, for the war. But not for us. Klaus stared at the ceiling. "My sister died." "I know." "She died in Gelsenkirchen during an air raid. But she was already sick. Malnutrition. She was 14 years old and weighed 78 pounds. The bomb just finished it." "My mother died in 43, Ernst said. "Tuberculosis. But it was really starvation. She was giving her food to my younger brother. She just faded." Across the barracks, Wilhelm Becker was sitting on his bunk writing a letter, writing and crossing out, writing and crossing out. You couldn't tell your family the truth. The letters were censored. But more than that, how could you tell them? How could you write, "Mother, we lost the war because the Americans have 47 aisles of food in small-town grocery stores"? They'd think you'd gone insane. Over the next 3 months, Klaus went to town 17 more times, different stores, the hardware store, the pharmacy, the feed store, the department store. Everywhere the same abundance, goods stacked to the ceiling. No rationing except for a few items, people buying freely, complaining about prices, about shortages that weren't really shortages. He saw women buying fabric to make dresses, fabric for decoration, for fashion. In Germany, fabric was military only. You wore what you had until it fell apart, then patched it. These women were buying fabric in 6 different colors to make dresses they didn't need. He saw children eating ice cream cones, ice cream, sugar and milk and cream, frozen, sold for 5 cents, given to children as a casual treat. In Germany, children didn't know what ice cream was. He saw men buying gasoline for recreational driving, just driving around for pleasure. In Germany, there was no gasoline except for military use. Period. The wealth was incomprehensible. And this was Kansas, flyover country, the breadbasket, not even a rich state, just normal America. In December 1944, Klaus was in town when news came over the radio. The Battle of the Bulge, Germany's last major offensive, desperate, throwing everything at the Americans in Belgium. The townspeople gathered in Henderson's store to listen. "They're trying to reach Antwerp," Eddie Morrison explained. "Cut our supply lines." Klaus said nothing. He knew it would fail. It had to fail. Because Germany was running on fumes, literally. The panzers would run out of gasoline. They always ran out of gasoline. While America had tanker trucks full of it, driving around Kansas, so farmers could take their families for Sunday drives. The offensive failed in 3 weeks. Klaus felt nothing when he heard. No sadness, no relief, just numbness. Christmas 1944. The camp held a celebration. The prisoners were given special rations, roast turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, pie, turkey. Klaus had never eaten turkey in his life. The guards ate the same meal in their mess hall, not special. Just Christmas dinner. Ernst sat across from Klaus. "Do you think about going back?" "We have to go back, I know. But do you think about it?" Klaus cut a piece of turkey, ate it. "I think about telling people, trying to explain. They won't believe me. No. They'll think it's propaganda, American lies. Yes, but it's true. Yes." They ate in silence. January 1945, February, March. The war in Europe was ending. Everyone knew it. The prisoners listened to BBC broadcasts in the recreation hall. The guards let them. Why not? The news was all bad for Germany. The Rhine crossed, Berlin encircled. It was over. In April, a new batch of prisoners arrived. Recent captures from the Battle of the Ruhr Pocket. They were skeletal, literally skeletal, bones showing through skin, hollow eyes. Several had to be hospitalized immediately. Klaus watched them stumble off the trucks. One of them, a teenager, couldn't be more than 17, collapsed in the yard. The medics carried him to the infirmary. Klaus stood there remembering. That had been him 8 months ago. Starving, broken, unable to believe the food was real. Ernst walked up beside him. "We looked like that. I know. And now look at us." Klaus looked down at himself. He weighed 168 pounds. Healthy weight. His skin had color. His teeth had stopped aching. His hair was growing back. He looked human. "They're going to see the store," Ernst said. "Henderson's grocery. They're going to see it and cry just like we did." "Yes. And then they'll understand." "Yes." May 8th, 1945. Germany surrendered. It was over. The prisoners gathered in the yard. The camp commander, Colonel Patterson, addressed them through an interpreter. "The war in Europe is over. Germany has surrendered unconditionally. You men will remain here until arrangements can be made for repatriation. I expect your continued cooperation. That is all. No cheering, no celebration, just silence." What was there to celebrate? Everything they'd believed in had failed. Everyone they'd fought for had lied to them. And now they'd have to go back to a country that was destroyed, occupied, starving. Starving. That was the word that haunted Klaus. Germany was going to starve now, really starve. The Allies would have to feed them because Germany couldn't feed itself. Never could. The entire Nazi project had been built on stolen food, from Poland, from Ukraine, from occupied territories. Now there was nothing left to steal, just ruins and hunger. Klaus stayed in Camp Concordia until February 1946. The repatriation was slow. France and Britain were using German POWs as labor to rebuild. America didn't need labor. They just wanted to send the prisoners home. But home to what? Klaus's final trip to town was in January 1946. Eddie Morrison, about to be discharged, took a small group to Henderson's store one last time. Klaus walked through the aisles slowly, memorizing. Trying to hold on to the proof. Mr. Henderson saw him, walked over. "You're going home soon, I heard." "Next month." "You scared?" Klaus nodded. "You should be," Mr. Henderson said quietly. "It's going to be hard over there, real hard, but you're young. You survived the war. You'll survive the peace too." "Mr. Henderson, thank you." "For what?" "For showing me, for letting me see. I'll never forget this." Mr. Henderson put a hand on Klaus's shoulder. "You seem like a good kid. Don't let the bitterness eat you up. Germany's got to rebuild, got to start over. It's going to need good young men like you to do it." Klaus sailed home on a victory ship in February 1946. The crossing took 9 days. They were fed well, better than German civilians were eating. Klaus stood on deck watching the coastline of Europe emerge through the mist. Bremen, destroyed. The harbor was rubble. The city was rubble. They were processed through a British camp first. Given delousing treatment, unnecessary, the Americans had kept them clean. Medical checkups, political questionnaires, then released. Klaus walked through Bremen, looking for a train to the Ruhr. The city was gone, not damaged. Gone. Block after block of rubble. People living in cellars. A woman tried to trade him sex for a cigarette. She looked 50, probably 30. Klaus gave her the cigarette and walked away. The train took 6 hours to reach Gelsenkirchen. He walked from the station to his family's house. The street was there. The house was not. Bombed. Collapsed. A neighbor, Frau Weber, he remembered her, saw him, ran over. Klaus Zimmermann, you're alive. My family? Your mother's at the Schalke relocation center. Your brothers too. They're alive. They made it. Klaus found them in a converted school gymnasium. 200 people living in one room. His mother was 49 years old. She looked 70, weighed maybe 90 pounds. His brothers, Hans and Peter, were teenagers, stunted, undersized, hungry. They cried when they saw him. He cried. Then his mother pulled back, looked at him, and her eyes widened. You're healthy. Mutti, they fed you. The Americans. They fed you." Klaus couldn't lie. "Yes." "Better than we ate." "Yes." She didn't say anything else, just held him. What was there to say? Klaus tried to tell them about Kansas, about the grocery stores, about the abundance. They listened politely. They didn't believe him, or they thought he was exaggerating, or they thought it had been a special case, propaganda, a trick. Only Hans, the smart one, the mathematical one, understood. "They beat us with food," Hans said. "Not just bullets. They grew food and we grew guns. And they had enough for both and we didn't. Yeah, we can't ever do this again. No." Klaus got work at the coal mine where his father had worked. The British needed coal. Germany had to produce. He worked underground for 3 years, the same tunnels his father had died in. The pay was barely enough to survive. Food was rationed until 1950. Real food, meat, eggs, butter, was rare until 1953. In 1949, Klaus married Greta, a girl from Essen whose family had also survived the bombing. They had 3 children. Klaus never talked about the war. Greta knew he'd been a prisoner in America. She never asked for details. In 1956, Klaus opened a small grocery store in Gelsenkirchen. Nothing like Henderson's store, small, basic, but clean, organized, fair prices. He remembered how Henderson had run his store, with dignity, treating customers with respect. By 1960, Germany was recovering, the economic miracle. Stores began to fill with goods again. Klaus's store did well. He expanded twice. His children grew up healthy. They never went hungry. They didn't understand what hunger meant. In 1964, Ernst Hoffmann found Klaus. He'd been looking for years. Ernst had moved to Hamburg, worked in shipping, married, had 2 daughters. They met in a cafe in Düsseldorf, neutral ground. "Do you remember Kansas?" Ernst asked. "Every day. Do you tell people?" "No. They wouldn't understand. My daughter asked me once where I was during the war. I told her I was a prisoner in America. She asked if it was terrible. I didn't know what to say." "What did you say?" "I told her it was complicated." They sat in silence. Then Ernst pulled out a newspaper clipping, an article about American supermarkets, the new trend, giant stores with hundreds of products, self-service, shopping carts. "They're coming here," Ernst said, "to Germany, American-style supermarkets. It's going to change everything." Klaus looked at the photo. Aisles stacked with goods. It looked like Henderson's store, just bigger. "Good," Klaus said. "It should have always been like this. We lost 60 million people to learn it." "Yes." Klaus ran his grocery store until 1984. He was 63. His son took over the business. Klaus retired to a small apartment in Gelsenkirchen. Greta died in 1987. Klaus lived alone. He watched the news, watched the Berlin Wall fall in 1989, watched Germany reunify in 1990. In 1992, a historian from the University of Bochum came to interview him. The historian was writing a book about German POWs in American camps. Someone had given him Klaus's name. "Herr Zimmermann, I'd like to ask you about your experience in Kansas." Klaus looked at the young man, 25 years old, fed his whole life. "No idea what hunger meant. What do you want to know?" "The records show you worked in Concordia. You went into town frequently. What was that like?" Klaus thought for a long time. "How do you explain? How do you make someone understand who's never gone hungry?" "There was a grocery store," Klaus said finally. "Henderson's. It had 47 aisles of food, no rationing. You could buy whatever you wanted. I cried the first time I saw it." The historian wrote this down. "Why did you cry?" "Because I understood we'd lost. Not just the war, everything. We'd been lied to. The hunger was a choice. Our leaders chose guns over bread, and America chose both. That's why we lost. Do you think the American abundance was propaganda, designed to break German morale?" "No." Klaus's voice was firm. "That's what I thought at first. But it wasn't propaganda. It was just normal. That's what made it so devastating. It was just Tuesday in Kansas." The historian's book was published in 1994. Klaus got a copy. His story was 2 pages. Accurate, fair, but just 2 pages among hundreds. Nobody noticed. Klaus Zimmermann died on March 12, 1998. He was 77 years old. Heart attack, quick, merciful. His obituary in the Gelsenkirchen newspaper was 4 sentences. Klaus Zimmermann, local grocer, died Tuesday. Born in Gelsenkirchen 1921, survived the war, leaves behind 3 children and 7 grandchildren. No mention of Kansas, no mention of Concordia, no mention of Henderson's grocery store or the moment he understood the war was lost. Just 4 sentences, a normal life, a common death. His children divided his possessions. In a drawer they found a box. Inside, a letter from Eddie Morrison, dated 1967. A photograph of Henderson's grocery store from a 1949 newspaper article. Klaus had somehow found it and kept it. And an apple seed dried, wrapped in paper, labeled Kansas 1944. His daughter asked his son what the apple seed meant. His son didn't know. They threw it away. In 2004, a small museum opened in Camp Concordia, now a historic site. The museum tells the story of German POWs in Kansas. There's a display about work crews and their interaction with the local community. Klaus Zimmermann is not mentioned. Ernst Hoffmann is not mentioned. Wilhelm Becker is not mentioned. But there's a photograph. A work crew standing in front of Henderson's grocery store in 1944. Eddie Morrison on the left. 6 prisoners, names unknown. Klaus is in the back row, 3rd from the right. Thin, young, staring at the camera with haunted eyes that already know the truth. The museum averages 2 Zauzeren visitors a year. Most of them are elderly. Veterans, people who remember the war. They look at the photographs, read the placards, try to imagine, but they can't. You had to be there, in that store, in that moment, to feel the shelves of food collapsing your entire worldview, to understand that everything you'd been told was a lie, to realize your sister died for nothing, your friends died for nothing, 6 years of war and 60 million deaths, all for nothing. Because on Main Street in Concordia, Kansas, in a grocery store with 47 aisles, the truth was stacked floor to ceiling. Germany lost because America had more. More food, more steel, more oil, more everything. And it wasn't even trying that hard. The hunger was a choice, the war was a lie. Hand Klaus Zimmermann learned it by eating an apple in the back of a truck on September 14, 1944. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the human cost of war and the lies nations tell themselves, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another forgotten story from World War II. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? What would you have done in Klaus's position? How do you tell someone that everything they believed was false? These stories disappear if we don't keep them alive. Thank you for being part of that. Thank you for remembering.